My name is Jack Thompson, and I'm about to tell you a story that will chill you to your very core. It's a tale of terror, survival, and the horrifying truth about what lurks in the shadows of the Catskill Mountains. I never believed in monsters or the supernatural, but after what I experienced, I'll never look at the world the same way again. It all began on a crisp autumn evening in October. I had just turned 25 and decided to celebrate by taking a solo camping trip in the Catskills. As an avid hiker and outdoorsman, I thought I was prepared for anything nature could throw at me. How wrong I was. I arrived at the campsite late in the afternoon, the sun already beginning to dip behind the towering trees. The air was thick with the scent of pine and decaying leaves, and an eerie silence hung over the forest. As I set up my tent, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. "Just your imagination, Jack," I muttered to myself, trying to calm my nerves. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. As night fell, I built a small fire and sat beside it, listening to the crackling flames and the occasional hoot of an owl. The moon rose full and bright, casting long shadows across the clearing. That's when I heard it, a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. My heart began to race as I scanned the tree line, searching for the source of the sound. The growl came again, closer this time, and I caught a glimpse of something moving in the darkness. Two glowing eyes reflected the firelight, and I froze in terror. Slowly, a massive shape emerged from the shadows. It was like nothing I had ever seen before. A creature that walked on two legs but was covered in thick, matted fur. Its snout was long and filled with razor-sharp teeth, and its claws looked capable of tearing a man to shreds in seconds. A werewolf. The word flashed through my mind, and I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. But there was no denying the nightmarish creature that stood before me. In that moment, survival instinct kicked in. I scrambled to my feet and ran, leaving everything behind. The sound of heavy footfalls and snarling filled the air as the beast gave chase. I crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping at my face and tearing at my clothes. My lungs burned as I pushed myself harder than I ever had before. I could feel the creature's hot breath on the back of my neck, spurring me to run faster. In the distance, I saw a rocky outcropping and made a split-second decision. With the last of my strength, I hurled myself towards the rocks, squeezing into a narrow crevice just as the werewolf's claws raked across my back. I bit back a scream of pain and wedged myself deeper into the crevice, praying that the monster couldn't reach me. For hours, I huddled in that small space, listening to the werewolf's frustrated howls and the sound of its claws scraping against the rock. As dawn approached, the sounds finally faded, and I dared to peek out. The forest was quiet once more, but the ground around the rocks was torn up, with deep claw marks scarring the earth. My campsite was in shambles, my tent shredded to ribbons. It wasn't a dream or a hallucination. It had all been real. Shaken and bleeding, I made my way back to civilization, my mind reeling from what I had experienced. But my ordeal was far from over. As I would soon discover, that night in the Catskills was just the beginning of a terrifying journey that would lead me deep into the heart of an ancient curse and a desperate fight for survival. Over the next few weeks, I tried to convince myself that what I had seen was just a bear or some other large animal. But the wounds on my back, which healed far too quickly to be normal, told a different story. And then there were the dreams, vivid nightmares of running through moonlit forests, my body twisting and changing into something inhuman. I became obsessed with finding answers. I scoured the internet for information on werewolves, poring over ancient legends and modern sightings. Most of it seemed like nonsense, but there were enough consistencies to make me wonder if there was some truth hidden beneath the myths. One name kept appearing in my research: Dr. Elena Vasquez, a cryptozoologist who had been studying reported werewolf sightings in the Catskills for years. Despite the ridicule she faced from the scientific community, Dr. Vasquez remained convinced that there was something out there. It took some doing, but I finally managed to track her down and convince her to meet with me. When I showed her my scars and told her my story, her eyes lit up with a mix of excitement and fear. "You're lucky to be alive," she said, examining the nearly healed claw marks on my back. "And even luckier that you weren't bitten. According to the legends, a bite from a werewolf can pass on the curse. I felt a chill run down my spine. So you believe me? You think what I saw was real? Dr. Vasquez nodded solemnly. I've been studying these creatures for years, but you're the first person I've met who's had such a close encounter and lived to tell about it. Your testimony could be the key to proving their existence. As we talked, Dr. Vasquez shared her theories about the werewolves of the Catskills. She believed they were part of an ancient bloodline, dating back centuries to when European settlers first came to the area. According to her research, the curse was passed down through generations, with some able to control their transformations better than others. But why haven't they been discovered before now? I asked. They're incredibly intelligent and secretive, she explained. They've learned to hide their true nature, blending in with human society. But during the full moon, their bestial side takes over, and that's when most sightings occur. The more we talked, the more I realized that my encounter in the woods was just the tip of the iceberg. There was an entire hidden world out there, one filled with danger and dark secrets. Dr. Vasquez proposed a plan. We would return to the Catskills during the next full moon to gather evidence, and if possible, make contact with the werewolves in their transformed state. It was risky, bordering on suicidal, but I knew I had to go back. I needed answers, and more importantly, I needed to know if I was truly safe, or if the curse was somehow affecting me. As the days passed and the full moon approached, we prepared for our expedition. Dr. Vasquez equipped us with cameras, infrared sensors, and other high-tech gear designed to capture proof of the werewolves' existence. I, on the other hand, was more concerned with our safety. I packed silver bullets, just in case the legends were true, and enough provisions to last us several days in the wilderness. The night before we left, I had the most vivid nightmare yet. I dreamed I was running through the forest on all fours, my body covered in thick fur, howling at the moon. When I woke up, I could have sworn I tasted blood in my mouth. The line between reality and nightmare was becoming increasingly blurred, and I feared what that might mean. As we drove up into the mountains, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. Dr. Vasquez was practically buzzing with excitement, but I felt a growing sense of dread. We were walking into the lion's den, and I wasn't sure we'd make it out alive. We set up our base camp in a clearing not far from where I had my first encounter. As darkness fell, we activated our equipment and began our vigil. Hours passed with nothing but the usual sounds of the forest at night. And then, just as before, we heard the growl. Dr. Vasquez's eyes widened, and she fumbled with her camera. I reached for the gun loaded with silver bullets, my hands shaking slightly. The growl came again, closer this time, and then we saw them, a pair of glowing eyes in the darkness. "Don't move," Dr. Vasquez whispered, her camera whirring as it recorded. "Let it come to us." I wanted to run, to hide, to do anything but stand there as the creature emerged from the shadows. But I stood my ground, watching in horror and fascination as the werewolf revealed itself. It was just as terrifying as I remembered. Massive, muscular, with a wolf-like head atop a body that was a nightmarish blend of human and beast. But this time, I noticed details I had missed before. There was intelligence in those glowing eyes, a spark of something almost human. The werewolf sniffed the air, its gaze locked on us. For a moment, I thought it might attack, but then something unexpected happened. It tilted its head as if curious and took a step closer. Dr. Vasquez, ever the scientist, began to speak softly. "We mean you no harm," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We just want to understand." To our amazement, the creature seemed to respond to her words. It sat back on its haunches, regarding us with an almost human-like expression of curiosity. And then, it did something that would change everything. It spoke. The voice was guttural and rough, barely recognizable as human, but the words were clear. "Why have you come back?" I nearly dropped the gun in shock. Dr. Vasquez gasped, her camera almost slipping from her grasp. The werewolf, this thinking, speaking creature, was addressing me directly. I needed to know the truth," I stammered, still struggling to process what was happening. "About what you are, about what happened to me that night." The werewolf's eyes narrowed, and for a moment I feared we had made a terrible mistake. But then it nodded, a surprisingly human gesture. You are brave or perhaps foolish to return, but your curiosity may yet be your salvation or your doom. Over the next few hours, we engaged in one of the most surreal conversations of my life. The werewolf, who told us his name was Caleb, revealed that he was part of a pack that had lived in the Catskills for generations. They were not mindless beasts, but thinking, feeling beings cursed with a dual nature. Caleb explained that on the night of our first encounter, he had been newly transformed and struggling to control his bestial side. I am sorry for the fear and pain I caused you, he said, his voice carrying a hint of remorse. It is a constant battle to maintain our humanity during the full moon. Dr. Vasquez was beside herself with excitement, peppering Caleb with questions about werewolf biology, society, and history. I, however, had more pressing concerns. Am I going to become like you? I asked, the fear I'd been holding back finally bubbling to the surface. Ever since that night, I've been having these dreams, and my body has been changing in ways I can't explain. Caleb studied me intently, his nostrils flaring as he scented the air. You were not bitten, so you do not carry the full curse. But, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Your encounter with me has awakened something within you, a potential that has always been there, dormant in your bloodline. My head spun with this revelation. What does that mean? Am I going to transform? Not fully, Caleb replied, but you may develop some of our traits: enhanced senses, accelerated healing, increased strength. And on the full moon, you may feel the pull of the wild more strongly than ever before. As this information sank in, I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. I wasn't going to become a full werewolf, but I wasn't entirely human anymore either. I was something in between, straddling two worlds. Our conversation with Caleb lasted until the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon. As the sky lightened, he began to change, his form shifting and twisting until a naked man stood before us. In his human form, Caleb was a rugged-looking man in his 40s, with streaks of gray in his dark hair and eyes that held the wisdom of countless moons. You must understand, he said, his voice now fully human, but still carrying the weight of his words. Our existence must remain a secret. The world is not ready to know about us. Dr. Vasquez nodded eagerly. Of course, we won't tell anyone. But please, can we meet again? There's so much more to learn, to understand. Caleb considered this for a moment before nodding. We have lived in isolation for too long. Perhaps it is time for a bridge to be built between our worlds. But tread carefully. There are those among us who would not welcome this contact. As we prepared to leave, Caleb pulled me aside. Your path forward will not be easy, he said, his eyes filled with a mixture of sympathy and warning. You are neither fully human nor fully wolf. You will need to find your own way to balance these two sides of yourself. I nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. What should I do? Return here during the next full moon, he said. I will teach you what I can about controlling the wild within you. But be warned, once you start down this path, there is no going back to the life you knew before. As Dr. Vasquez and I made our way back to civilization, my mind was reeling from everything we had learned. The world was far stranger and more wonderful than I had ever imagined, but it was also more dangerous. I knew that my life would never be the same, but I was determined to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Over the next few months, I returned to the Catskills during each full moon, meeting with Caleb and learning to harness my newfound abilities. Dr. Vasquez continued her research, documenting everything with scientific precision while keeping the true nature of her discoveries secret from the world. As I grew stronger and more in tune with my partial werewolf nature, I began to understand the responsibility that came with this knowledge. I became a protector of sorts, using my enhanced abilities to help others while keeping the secret of the werewolf safe. But our actions did not go unnoticed. There were other forces at work in the shadows, both human and supernatural, who saw our growing understanding as a threat. As the seasons changed and our knowledge grew, so too did the dangers we faced. Little did I know that my terrifying encounter in the woods was just the beginning of an even greater adventure, one that would test the limits of my humanity, challenge my understanding of the world, and force me to confront the beast that now lived within my very soul. The months following my initial encounter with Caleb and the werewolves of the Catskills were a whirlwind of discovery, training, and increasing danger. Each full moon, I would return to the forest, where Caleb would teach me to harness and control my newfound abilities. I learned to sharpen my senses, to hear the faintest rustle of leaves from hundreds of yards away, to smell the lingering scent of a deer that had passed through hours before. My strength and speed increased dramatically, and wounds that would have taken weeks to heal now closed in days. But with these gifts came a price. As the full moon approached each month, I felt a wildness growing within me, a primal urge that threatened to overwhelm my human rationality. Caleb taught me techniques to maintain control: meditation, focusing exercises, and most importantly, accepting this new part of myself rather than fighting against it. The more you resist, the stronger the beast becomes, he explained during one of our sessions. You must learn to dance with your wild nature, to guide it rather than suppress it. Dr. Vasquez continued to document my transformation, running tests and recording data. Her excitement was palpable, but she respected Caleb's warnings about keeping their existence a secret. Instead, she focused on publishing carefully worded papers about unknown species in the Catskills, hinting at but never fully revealing the truth. As my control grew, so did my curiosity about the wider world of werewolves. Caleb began to share more about their history and society. I learned that there were different packs scattered across the country, each with its own traditions and rules. Some, like Caleb's pack, sought to live in harmony with their human sides in the natural world. Others embraced their bestial nature more fully, seeing humans as little more than prey. There has long been a divide among our kind, Caleb explained one night as we sat around a small fire. Those who see our condition as a curse to be managed, and those who view it as a gift that elevates us above humanity. This schism has led to conflicts in the past, and I fear it may do so again. His words proved prophetic. As summer turned to fall, we began to notice signs that all was not well in the werewolf world. Caleb spoke of increased tensions between packs, of rumors that some were pushing for a more aggressive stance towards humans. And then there were the disappearances. At first it was just whispers, hikers going missing in remote areas, campers vanishing without a trace. But as the numbers grew, a pattern began to emerge. The disappearances were clustered around areas known to be werewolf territories, but not those of Caleb's pack. Something is coming, Caleb warned during one of our meetings. There are those among us who believe it's time to stop hiding, to claim our place as the apex predators we are. They see humans as weak, as little more than cattle, and they're gaining support. The gravity of the situation hit me hard. The secret world I had stumbled into was on the brink of war, and the unsuspecting human population was caught in the middle. I knew then that the knowledge and abilities I had gained came with a responsibility I couldn't ignore. What can we do? I asked, looking from Caleb to Dr. Vasquez. Caleb's expression was grim. We must gather allies, both werewolf and human. There are those in positions of power who know of our existence. Law enforcement, government officials. It's time to bring them into the fold, to prepare for what's coming. Dr. Vasquez nodded in agreement. I have contacts in various scientific and governmental organizations. It's risky, but I think I can arrange some discreet meetings. And so began the next phase of our journey. While continuing my training with Caleb, I also started working with Dr. Vasquez to carefully reveal the truth to selected individuals. It was a delicate balance, providing enough proof to be believed without causing panic or attracting unwanted attention. We met with forest rangers who had encountered strange phenomena in the woods, detectives puzzling over unsolved disappearances, and even a few open-minded politicians who recognized the potential threat. Slowly, carefully, we built a network of allies, human and werewolf alike, united in the goal of preventing an all-out war between species. But our efforts didn't go unnoticed. As we worked to build alliances, we also found ourselves being hunted. It started with subtle signs. The feeling of being watched, mysterious figures glimpsed at the edge of the forest. Then came the attacks. The first happened on a night when I was patrolling the outskirts of Caleb's territory. A group of werewolves, larger and more feral than any I had seen before, ambushed me. Their eyes glowed with a reddish tint, and their movements were jerky, almost rabid. It was only thanks to my training and enhanced abilities that I managed to escape, but not without injury. As Caleb tended to my wounds, his face was etched with worry. "These were not natural werewolves," he said, examining the deep gashes on my arm. "Something has changed them, twisted their nature. I fear our enemies are growing stronger and more desperate." The attacks continued, targeting not just me and Caleb, but also members of his pack and even some of our human allies. We were forced to go on the defensive, setting up safe houses and developing new protocols to protect ourselves and our network. Through it all, the pull of my own wild nature grew stronger. Each full moon became a battle not just against external threats, but against the beast within me. There were nights when I would wake up in the forest, miles from where I had started, with no memory of how I got there. The line between man and wolf was blurring, and I feared losing myself entirely. It was during one of these moments of internal struggle that I had a breakthrough. Exhausted from fighting against my nature, I finally surrendered to it, letting the wild flow through me without resistance. To my amazement, instead of being overwhelmed, I found a new level of clarity and control. My senses sharpened beyond anything I had experienced before, and I could feel a deep connection to the forest around me. In that moment of perfect balance between man and wolf, I sensed something that chilled me to my core. There was a wrongness in the air, a scent of corruption that seemed to seep from the very ground. Following this sensation, I found myself deep in a part of the forest I had never explored before. There, hidden in a secluded valley, I discovered the source of our troubles. A group of rogue werewolves had set up a camp, but it was unlike anything Caleb had described. These creatures were experimenting on themselves and others, using a combination of ancient rituals and modern science to enhance their bestial nature at the cost of their humanity. I watched in horror as they forced their transformation on captured humans, creating the feral, red-eyed werewolves that had been attacking us. It was a perversion of everything Caleb had taught me about the balance between man and wolf. Slipping away undetected, I raced back to warn Caleb and Dr. Vasquez. The information I had gathered confirmed our worst fears. This rogue group was planning to create an army of enhanced werewolves, with the goal of revealing their existence to the world and establishing themselves as the dominant species. We knew then that time was running out. The delicate balance between the human world and the hidden realm of werewolves was on the verge of shattering. If we didn't act soon, the consequences would be catastrophic. As we gathered our allies and prepared for the confrontation that we knew was coming, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. From a skeptical hiker who didn't believe in monsters, I had become a bridge between two worlds, carrying the weight of both on my shoulders. The final battle was approaching, and the fate of both humans and werewolves hung in the balance. The skills I had learned, the alliances we had forged, and the delicate balance I had found within myself would all be put to the ultimate test. As the next full moon rose over the Catskill Mountains, casting its silvery light over the ancient forests, I steeled myself for what was to come. The night was alive with tension, the air thick with the scent of impending conflict. This was it, the moment that would determine the future of two species and my place within both worlds. Our plan was as dangerous as it was desperate. Using the network we had built, we had managed to gather a coalition of Caleb's pack, sympathetic werewolves from other territories, and a select group of human allies who understood the gravity of the situation. Our goal was to strike at the heart of the rogue werewolves' operation, putting an end to their experiments and preventing their planned revelation of werewolf existence to the world. As we moved through the forest in small groups, I found myself at the forefront with Caleb and Dr. Vasquez. My enhanced senses were on high alert, every snapped twig and rustling leaf a potential threat. The corrupted scent I had detected earlier was stronger now, a miasma that seemed to taint the very air around us. We approached the hidden valley where I had discovered the rogue werewolves' camp. The scene that greeted us was even more nightmarish than before. The valley floor was dotted with cages containing humans in various stages of forced transformation, their agonized howls piercing the night. At the center of it all stood a massive bonfire, around which dozens of red-eyed, feral werewolves danced in a frenzied ritual. "By the moon," Caleb whispered, his voice thick with horror. "They've gone completely mad." Dr. Vasquez's scientific curiosity warred with her obvious revulsion. The combination of ancient magic and modern science, it's created something entirely new and entirely dangerous. I felt the pull of the wild stronger than ever, the beast within me responding to the primal energy emanating from the valley. But instead of fighting it, I embraced it, finding that perfect balance I had discovered earlier. In that moment of clarity, I knew what had to be done. "We need to free the prisoners and destroy their research," I said, my voice carrying a new note of authority. "But most importantly, we need to stop whoever is leading this." As if in response to my words, a figure emerged from the largest tent in the camp. He was massive, even for a werewolf, with jet black fur streaked with silver. His eyes glowed not with the feral red of his followers, but with an intelligent, calculating amber. This, I realized, was the mastermind behind it all. "Nathaniel," Caleb growled, recognition and anger mixing in his voice. I should have known he was behind this. He always sought power above all else. With a howl that shook the very ground, Nathaniel signaled to his followers. They turned as one, their red eyes fixing on our position. Our element of surprise was gone. "Now!" I shouted, and our coalition burst into action. What followed was a battle unlike anything I could have imagined. The night air filled with snarls, howls, and the sound of flesh tearing flesh. Our allies fought with everything they had, werewolves and humans working side by side against the twisted creations of Nathaniel's experiments. I found myself in the thick of the fight, my partially transformed state allowing me to move with inhuman speed and strength. I freed prisoners from their cages, fought off attackers, and worked my way toward the center of the camp, where Nathaniel stood, directing his forces with cruel efficiency. Dr. Vasquez, armed with tranquilizer guns loaded with a specially formulated sedative, moved through the chaos with surprising skill. She targeted the most frenzied of our opponents, dropping them before they could cause too much damage. Meanwhile, Caleb was a whirlwind of fur and claws, years of experience evident in every move he made. But for all our preparation, we were outnumbered. The feral werewolves fought with a berserker rage that made them formidable opponents. For everyone we took down, it seemed two more took their place. I saw allies fall, heard cries of pain and anguish from both sides, and felt the tide of battle turning against us. It was in this moment of near defeat that I locked eyes with Nathaniel across the battlefield. His amber gaze was filled with a mixture of triumph and disdain. With a roar, he began to make his way towards me, swatting aside anyone, friend or foe, who got in his way. I knew then that this was it, the final confrontation that would determine the outcome of this war. As Nathaniel approached, I felt a calm settle over me. All the training, all the struggles with my dual nature had led to this moment. "You're an abomination," Nathaniel snarled as he circled me. "Neither human nor true wolf. You don't belong in either world." "You're wrong," I replied, my voice steady despite the chaos around us. "I'm a bridge between worlds, proof that balance is possible. You're the one who has lost his way." With a roar of fury, Nathaniel lunged at me. The fight that ensued was like nothing I had experienced before. He was stronger, more experienced, his every move honed by years of embracing his bestial nature. But I was quicker, more adaptable, my human intellect working in perfect harmony with my wolf-enhanced body. We traded blows that would have killed a normal human, our regenerative abilities healing wounds almost as quickly as they were inflicted. The battle raged on, a microcosm of the larger conflict surrounding us. In Nathaniel, I saw the dark path I could have taken, sacrificing humanity for power, and in that recognition, I found my strength. As the fight reached its climax, I feinted to the left, drawing Nathaniel into overextending himself. In that split second of vulnerability, I struck. My claws found his throat, and with a twist, I ended the threat he posed once and for all. The death of their leader seemed to break something in the feral werewolves. Some fled into the night, while others collapsed, the fight draining out of them. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, an eerie quiet settled over the battlefield. The aftermath was a blur of activity. We tended to the wounded, secured the prisoners, and began the process of cleaning up the evidence of the night's events. Dr. Vasquez, her clothes torn and bloodied, but her scientific curiosity undiminished, immediately set to work studying Nathaniel's research, determined to find a way to reverse the effects of his experiments. As I stood on the edge of the valley, watching the sunrise, I felt Caleb's presence beside me. "It's over," he said softly, "for now at least." I nodded, understanding the weight of his words. We had won this battle, but the war, the constant struggle to maintain the balance between human and wolf, between secrecy and revelation, would continue. "What happens now?" I asked, suddenly feeling the exhaustion of the night's events. Caleb's eyes were filled with a mixture of sorrow and hope as he surveyed the valley. "We rebuild, we heal, and we continue to work towards a future where our two worlds can coexist in peace." As we made our way back through the forest, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. From that terrifying night when I first encountered Caleb, through months of learning and struggle, to this final climactic battle, I had been transformed in ways I never could have imagined. I was no longer just Jack Thompson, the avid hiker who ventured into the Catskills for a solitary camping trip. I was something more, a guardian of secrets, a protector of two worlds, a living bridge between human and wolf. The sun climbed higher in the sky, its warm rays chasing away the last shadows of the night. As we emerged from the forest, I took a deep breath, savoring the sense of the world around me. The rich earth, the blooming flowers, the lingering traces of the wild. I knew that challenges lay ahead. There would be wounds to heal, both physical and emotional. We would need to be vigilant against others who might follow in Nathaniel's footsteps. And always, there would be the delicate task of maintaining the secret of the werewolves' existence while forging connections with trustworthy humans. But for now, in this moment, I felt a sense of peace. I had found my place in a world far larger and more wondrous than I had ever dreamed. And whatever the future held, I was ready to face it. Not as man or wolf, but as both, in perfect balance. As we made our way back to civilization, the first stirrings of the human world reaching our ears, I smiled. The night had been long and filled with terror, but a new day was dawning, and in that dawn I saw the promise of a future where the line between myth and reality, between human and wolf, might finally begin to blur in a way that brought understanding rather than fear. The werewolf hunt that had begun as my personal nightmare had transformed into a quest for balance and coexistence. And though the hunt would likely never truly end, I was no longer prey, but a protector of both worlds. With one last look at the mountains that had changed my life forever, I stepped forward into the light of a new day, ready for whatever adventures and challenges awaited in the shadowy realm between two worlds.